To the book of Hosea. Those of you that are watching by live stream, as many of you would know, that we, in our adult Sunday school class, we've been going through what we've entitled a bird's eye view of the Old Testament. And in this, so we've started in the book of Genesis, and we've gone through now up to, going to finish up the book of Hosea today. And a bird's eye view is a bird flies high and they fly fast. And so the ideal of this Bible study was to go through these books of the Bible and give some insight into these books and give some overview of what these books were about. And that's how it started out. Well, when I first got started, I started giving a little summary, just a small summary, of each chapter, and so I've been able to do that, except for the book of, for the Psalms and also for the Proverbs. Other than the Psalms and Proverbs, and we did have a nice study in the book of Psalms and a nice study in the Proverbs, but we didn't go chapter by chapter. But all the other books thus far, we've been able to go chapter by chapter, and so the ideal, when we're finished with this, which we should be finished probably in a few months, we have, we don't have many more books to go. But when we're finished with that, we're going to put it in a folder, and we'll make it available for those that would like to have it. And I think the way I think it will be a benefit to us is when we read our Bible through, that if we had this little summary, hopefully it could help us to understand. Because all of us have been to the place where we read through, especially the Old Testament, and, we read the Scripture, and then after we read 4 or 5 or 6 chapters, we think, I wonder we read the words, but we didn't maybe have as much, understanding, and I'm as guilty. As I've done this study the last several months, I just realized how much I don't know about the Word of God and how rich it is. So, hope this will be a blessing to you. It's hard to teach a book of the Bible in a 30-minute Sunday school lesson, for sure. So I just want to whet your appetite. And so in this little outline, let's begin we finished 5 verses last time. So now we're going to try to go through the rest of the book, beginning with chapter 6. Remember, Hosea is kind of like the prophet Jeremiah. He was a broken-hearted prophet. He was brokenhearted over the sins of Israel. And so you'll find in this Hosea, you're going to find the word Israel and Samaria and Ephraim. You'll find those 3 words, and they're referring to the same group of people. Remember, this is a time when the kingdom was divided. After Solomon, there was a split in the kingdom. And so two tribes went under Solomon's son, and then 10 tribes were split off. It went over a man by the name of Jeroboam, who led 10 tribes. And so they became the northern 10 tribes and the 2 southern tribes. The northern tribes they never had a good king. All their kings were wicked. And Hosea is at the end of this 10-king kingdom. And they're about to be taken into captivity and about to be scattered throughout the world to be no more, and they'll only be gathered again in the tribulation period and then in the millennial reign. So he's the prophet to this northern kingdom, the 10 tribes known as Israel, Samaria, and Ephraim. Look with me on our outline. I'll just, best way I can do is I try to underline some things. This is just a summary. Remember, what you have in your hand is a Sunday school lesson. What I've written down is not infallible at all. It's my best understanding that I could get from this, and I've spent a lot of time on it, but yet that doesn't make it infallible. What you have in your lap, that's the Bible, is infallible. What you have as a Sunday school outline is not infallible. Well, let's look at it. Chapter 6, Hosea was concerned about the waywardness of his people. So remember, he was the prophet to the northern kingdom, and they were very wicked people. So he had thoughts of pity and thoughts of anger for their idolatry. Now remember, Hosea, this book starts in the premise of this book was Hosea was asked of God to go marry a woman. It says a woman of whoredoms. Now, the world, the nations of the northern kingdom were all living in great wickedness. So there was a lot of sexual things that were being done in the name of even religion and the name of the Lord. And so the Lord said to Hosea, you go marry a woman. So he met a woman and he married her. I don't know how long it took him to find this woman, but he loved her. Her name was Gomer. And Gomer, he married Gomer, and they had a child. And then Gomer went out into the world and played. She played the part of a whore, and she went out and prostituted herself to men. And there was two children that was born out of that relationship with other men. And so Hosea was heartbroken over his wife. And he would plead with her, and he would try to be tough with her. He even had the kids beg her to come back, but she wouldn't come back. Well, finally, he didn't give up, and he went to her. She had got out, and she went out and sold herself as a slave, probably a sex slave to some man. And so Gomer was there, and she was pretty down and out. And so Hosea goes and buys her. Remember, the story is in chapter 3. He buys her for the price of half the price of a common slave. It was for 15 pieces of silver. Remember, Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver, and so he bought her back for 15 pieces of silver and some barley and wheat or whatever it was for some animals. So she was, the man that owned her didn't think much of her. So anyway, that's kind of the story. So now this Hosea, what he was living through in his home was what God was living through with Israel. Israel's wife, God's wife, Israel, had prostituted herself to religion. And so this is kind of the premise of this whole thing. So let's look back here in chapter 6. In the beginning of the chapter, in the outline, it says, we preview the children of Israel at the end of the tribulation as they make their decision to return to the Lord. So remember, this is all prophecy, and Israel will return back to the Lord one day. Now, Jews can be saved today. Jews are saved like Gentiles are saved. They're saved by the grace of God. But in large, the Jewish nation, the Jewish people, by and large, have rejected. They believe in the Messiah, but they just don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. But one day, it's going to be in the tribulation period. We find that in the book of Revelation, that when the Lord comes back, and after the time of Jacob's trouble, when God has to take them to the woodshed, so to speak, and then they recognize, hey, the error of their way. Jesus is the Messiah. And so they will receive him at the end of the tribulation period. Now, look in verse 1. It says, come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. Okay, so the Lord, let's return to the Lord. He says he's the Lord, when we need to return to the Lord is when we're away from the Lord. And when we're away from the Lord, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourgeth every son that he receiveth. So he's saying, come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us. In the third day he will rise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Now notice it says after 2 days. Now those 2 days, a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. Based upon that, I put in the outline, we see a possible reference. I put possible because, I'm not 100% sure, but it seems a very good indication. We see a possible reference to the time of this prophecy of when the Jews will return to the Lord. After 2 days, now 2 days would represent the church age. Basically around a 2,000-year period in the church age. It says after 2 days. What comes after 2 days? After the church period is what? The tribulation period. So after 2 days, he will revive us, it says. which points to the tribulation period. And the third day, we would think of the third day as being the millennial reign, the 1,000-year reign with Christ on this earth. So that would follow that a terminology. The Jews will be raised up. So this seems to be a prophecy of the resurrection of the nation that was dead and is born in a day at the end of the tribulation. So the wicked sins of idol-worshiping Ephraim and the kingdom of Judah, following in their footsteps, have brought judgment upon themselves. Israel is being judged by God because of their own wickedness. And chapter 7, the sins of Israel's religious leaders. Notice it's kind of a sad commentary. It says, verse 1, when I've healed Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim, remember Ephraim is the 10 tribes, was discovered, and the wickedness of Samaria, for they commit falsehood, and the thief cometh in, and the troop of robbers spoileth without. And they consider not in their hearts that I remember all their wickedness. Man, isn't that just like mankind? Sometimes we can think that, well, God's forgot about. No, he remembers all. Yeah, nothing escapes him. Verse 3 says, they make the king glad with their wickedness and the princes with their lies. Verse 4, they are all adulterers. Wow. I mean, here was a wicked, this place was wicked, and not only was it a wicked in one tribe, all the tribes were wicked. So it says, and they go back to this outline, it says, the sins of Israel's leaders have brought gladness to wicked politicians, and sin spread to the people. It is something that the politicians and the priests and the princes were happy when the people were wicked. Wow. Why? It was because they were wicked. Listen, people that are wicked, they're happy when other people are wicked. It makes them feel better about themselves. So continue on that outline. It says, God was well aware of their folly. Verse 2, God gave Hosea an illustration of a slothful baker. You could read that illustration there. It says in verse 4, chapter 7, verse 4, they are all adulterers as an oven heated by the baker, who ceases from raising after he has kneaded the dough until it is leavened. In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. He stretcheth out his hand with scorners, and they have made ready their hearts like an oven, whilst they lie in wait. Their baker sleepeth all the night. In the morning he burneth as a flaming fire. They are all hot as an oven, and have devoured the judges. All their kings are fallen. There is none among them that calleth unto me. So here's the Lord said, they have nothing to do with the Lord. They're all into their idol worship. It says, Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Now that it's like having if you had a pancake and you put it on the oven and you never turn it, what's going to happen? It's going to burn on one side and it's going to be dough on the other side. Nobody's going to eat that. It's useless. Ephraim, and that's the example. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Wow. So there was 3 illustrations. One was a slothful baker, and that was comparing to Ephraim's sin. Another one was this cake not turned in verse 8. And then a third one is in verse 9. It says, strangers have devoured his strength, and he knoweth it not. Yea, gray hairs are here and there upon him, yet he knoweth it not. And the pride of Israel testifies to his face, and they do not return to the Lord for their God, nor to seek for all this. So Ephraim. Now Ephraim was down in Ephraim was one of the tribes was a town by the name of Bethel, and Jeroboam had decided, instead of for the people of the 10 tribes, instead of them going down to the where the southern tribes live, there was a separation there. And so he said, we don't have, let's not, we're supposed to go to Jerusalem to worship. Let's not go down to Jerusalem to worship. So he set up 2 golden calves, one in Dan, which was the northern part of the northern kingdom, and then another one was in Ephraim, which is in the southern part of this northern kingdom. And so he said, when it's time for us to worship, we'll go to. You don't have to go to Jerusalem to the temple. You just go up to Dan or down to Ephraim. And you'll be able to worship one of the idols there. So it was a very wicked time, and God was pouring out, ready to pour out His judgment upon them. And of course, Hosea was his spokesman to try to warn them. Chapter 8, a warning to Israel begins this chapter. Set the trumpet to thy mouth; he shall come as an eagle against the house of the Lord, because they have transgressed my covenant and trespassed against my law. So here's God, before He brings judgment, He always gives a warning. And so this warning was the prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar, the Assyrian, who was going to come as an eagle. An eagle is swift and powerful. It's going to come against Israel. So there again it says in the outline there, at the direction of King Jeroboam, they were worshiping golden calves in Dan in the north, and at Bethel. Bethel was in Ephraim in the south. That was the south part of the northern kingdom. There was not idol worship at that time in Judah, which was the 2 southern tribes. Okay, so chapter 9, we'll move on into chapter 9. Israel was rejoicing and feasting as if everything was all right. Look at chapter 9. It says, here was the warning from Hosea. And of course, we know it was from the Lord through Hosea. It says, rejoice not, O Israel, for joy as other people, for thou hast gone a whoring from thy God. Thou hast loved a reward upon every corn floor. He said, you're living your life as though everything's okay, but you're living in spiritual adultery, and how can you think everything is okay? But there's, you put that into our time, there's a lot of people that are living in the world. They call themselves Christians. They think everything's okay, but they're living, it's just a mirage. They're not right with the Lord. So the warning was that Egypt and Assyria were coming, and when they came, this chapter says that they will take the treasure. All this treasure that you're getting for yourself, all these treasures will be taken from you because you're going to be invaded by the Assyrians under Nebuchadnezzar. That's in chapter 9. Look at the last sentence on chapter 9 there on the front page. It says, the judgment that God will bring upon Ephraim will leave barrenness upon their land and upon their people. And I'll give you some information about Gilgal, which is a place that's mentioned there. Gilgal was a place that a lot of great things happened for Israel, but now Gilgal was also a place where they were rejecting the Lord, and so I'll give you some information on that. In chapter number 10, Hosea chapter number 10, that's an interesting chapter. Israel is an empty vine. Wow. An empty vine has no fruit on it. Israel, there's no fruit. An empty vine is a useless thing. So this is what God saw. And so Hosea said, Hosea saw Israel's religion as an empty vine. They were worshiping goodly images. They were goodly images. They thought they were great, but they were vain. These images of golden calves caused hemlock. That's another interesting verse. Let me find that verse. Look at verse 4. It says, they have spoken words, swearing falsely in making a covenant. Thus judgment springeth up as hemlock. You know what hemlock is? Hemlock is poison. And so it says judgment springeth up as poison or hemlock in the furrows of the field. Wow. So there wasn't any fruit in the field, but there was a lot of poison because of the emptiness of their vine and the emptiness of their religion. Real worship was being replaced by ritual and dead idols. And so this was the condition of the northern kingdom. And so chapter 11, God leads Hosea to ponder the past dealings that God had with Israel. So he says, God led Israel out of Egypt and called thy son out of Egypt. So remember that? The children of Israel. Hosea, God's reminding the children of Israel, hey, remember where you came from. You know, sometimes we forget where we came from too. You know, we were brought out of sin. We were all sinners, and we're still sinners, but we're saved sinners. We're child of the King. But one time we were lost, and we were on our way to hell. And God saved us, and we can't forget what God has done for us. But Israel had forgotten. God brought them out of Egypt, out of bondage. They were down there making bricks and slaves to the world, and God let them out, and then he led them through the wilderness. God had done a great work for Israel, but they forgot all that, you know, and so they had given themselves, you know, turned from God. So he said, and called my son out of Egypt. Remember when the Lord Jesus in the Christmas story, kind of you find out that they had to they took Jesus down into Egypt for protection because Herod was going to kill all babies, and so they take him down there, and so then they brought him out of Egypt. You know, of course, he came out of Egypt. So that's what that phrase means, okay? Chapter 12, Hosea proclaims Ephraim is living in deception and as they make a covenant with the Assyrians, their enemies. So here, Israel, they saw the Assyrians coming to overtake them, so they thought, well, what we'll do, we just go make a treaty with them. We'll go make friends with them. Well, no, that wasn't going to work. And so they should have been looking to God for protection, but they were trying to go to their enemy for protection, and there was no protection. So that's what that chapter is about. Very quickly, let's go into chapter number 13. It says, chapter 13 begins, when Ephraim spake trembling, he exalted himself in Israel, but when he offended in Baal, he died. So here, the children of Israel were spiritually dead, and they were kissing the calf. Look down in the last phrase there in verse 2. They say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. They were ignoring the Lord and bowing down and kissing idols. Wow. How wicked could they get? So I put on this summary. God's judgment was on the rebellious people of Israel when Ephraim, which means double blessed, had served God. They lived in his blessings, but because they gave themselves over to Baal worship, they would one day be put out of the land. Their idol worship, leading them to kiss the golden calf dedicated to Baal, was a big show of religion. Boy, there's people today that bow down to an idol over in Rome. They bow down to an idol of Peter, and they kiss his toe. It's a show of religion. It's a show of affection, but it's vain. There's nothing there. It's useless. It's blasphemy, really. It says, this religion was like the morning clouds, and the dew, the chaff, and the chimney smoke. It was all show, but no benefit. Religion has a way to please God, but I should put a little g there. Religion has a way to please their God, but it is vain and hopeless. God cannot be pleased with religion, okay? The last chapter, and we'll finish up here, chapter 14. Chapter 14 says, O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. So this is the final plea of this prophecy of Hosea. He pleads for Israel to return to the Lord, and Israel's sin was the reason for their coming captivity and judgment. You know, Israel wanted to blame other people, like most people want to pass the buck, but the problem was their own. They created their own problem. Israel's future restoration would not come by military might nor idols made with their hands. The tender mercy of the Lord will one day heal their backsliding. So the only hope for Israel is when they turn to the Lord for restoration. So when the Lord returns, verse 1, I found it verse 1, O Israel, return unto the Lord, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. So when they return, he will restore them. Verse 4, I will heal their backslidings. I will love them freely. See, God, even though God is not happy with Israel. He has not forsaken them. And the type is when Gomer left Hosea. He married Gomer, and she left and went out and prostituted herself. And he pleaded with her. He was very unhappy with her. Sometimes he was angry with her, but he still loved her. Even though he never gave up on her. And God is angry many times with Israel as he is with believers, but he never gives up on us, and he never gives up on Israel, and as Hosea never gave up on his wife, and one day she did come back. So let me just read what I put down for the last part here. When Israel returns unto the Lord and he restores them, that's the only way they can be restored, then they will be revived. They'll understand, hey, Jesus is the Messiah. That's going to take place. The day of restoration will be the 1,000-year reign. Ephraim will love their new life with him. You see, after the tribulation, when we go out into the 1,000-year reign, Israel is going to be right with God. The Jews are going to be right with God. And it's going to be that 1,000-year millennial reign is going to be, there's going to be a Jewish revival during that time. It's going to be a wonderful thing, and we'll be a part of it. This wonderful closing gives us the future return, restoration, revival of Ephraim, the northern tribes, the wayward ones. Israel portrays a picture of a people turning from idol worship and was typified by Gomer being restored to Hosea and turning from her adulterous lifestyle. And then my last thought as I concluded this book was Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing Grace. Wow. The wickedness of men, the wickedness of us, and God's mercy and grace toward us. Amen. Next week, we'll start in Joel, the prophet of the two southern tribes. There's 3 chapters, so Lord willing, I've started on it, but I don't have it finished yet. So Lord willing, in a few hours, I'll be able to finish that up, and we'll go through the book of Joel next week. There is a great Toyota that's... I don't know if their lights are on or what's going on. It just says a great Toyota. If that's your car, license number is 011YAM, I think. If that's your car, you might want to look after it. Something's going on. Okay. Okay, Lord bless you. Thanks for being here in Sunday school today. If you're watching on live stream, remember, let me know. PreacherSiler@gmail.com.